are supernatural Nephilim hybrid kings, 10 of them, going to one day, very soon, rule on the earth, possibly rule you and me. In Revelation 17, we're specifically told that there are 10 horns of the beast, and that those 10 horns are 10 kings. So naturally, most Christians throughout the ages have assumed that these were human kings, right? Maybe the king of Iran or the king of Saudi Arabia. People have had all kind of ideas. But is it possible? They're not really human, but supernatural. Hybrid kings, genetically altered humans, what the Bible calls Nephilim. Well, it seems to be more than just possible. It seems the Bible directly implies this in Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the metal statue in the book of Daniel, in a part talking about iron mixed with clay. Very famous and controversial part. This is Bible teacher Nelson Walters, and we have spent a tremendous amount of time on this channel discussing the meaning behind the dream of this statue in Daniel 2. But frankly, the most important aspect of that statue to us today, prophetically, is what happens in the end times when the toes of iron and clay mixed form. And today, we're looking at the most controversial part of all of that, the aspect that the 10 kings might be hybrids, or what the Bible calls Nephilim or giants. Unless you're really into prophecy, you probably didn't see that coming. When will that happen? And more important, what should a Christian today do to prepare for something like that? So let's get right into it. In the book of Daniel, we learn about a very strange dream that King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon had of a great metal statue composed of 5 layers: gold, silver, bronze, iron, and iron mixed with clay. Yeah, you heard me right. Clay is a metal. Ancient texts sometimes refer to clay as soft metal. Clay is made up of magnesium or aluminum mixed with silica. So it's definitely a metallic material. These layers represented the demonic kingdoms that would rule the earth from the time of King Nebuchadnezzar, who had the dream, until the rule of the Antichrist, and then finally the return of Jesus. These kingdoms were Babylon, gold, Persia, silver, Greece, bronze, Rome, iron, all of which existed before the birth of our Messiah. Rome then continued to rule right up until the present day. So the dream statue transitions from Babylon to Persia, then to Greece, then to Rome. And Rome has continued, as we said, for these last 2,000 years, splitting into an eastern leg that became Europe and a western leg that became Islam. Now, it will soon become an empire that mixes that iron with a 5th metal material, clay. Here's what Daniel says to Nebuchadnezzar about this material. And as you saw the feet and toes, that's the important part. Remember, this is the end time part. Partly of potter's clay, partly of iron, it shall be a divided kingdom, but some of the firmness of iron shall be in it, just as you saw iron mixed with soft clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly iron, partly clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly brittle. Daniel 2, 41 through 42. And that, kind of seems pretty normal right there. He's talking about a kingdom that's divided, some of it's strong, some of it's brittle. But then comes verse 43, the one that might be one of the most controversial verses in the Bible. Let's look at what the King James Version says about that. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. There's some really strange stuff going on here. They will mingle themselves? Who is the they? They will mingle themselves with the seed of men. What's the seed of men? Okay, you might say, maybe that's just the King James Version talking in some old language version. It's maybe that's not right. What does a more literal translation say? Well, let's try the Young's literal translation. Hard to get more literal than that, right? Because thou hast seen iron mixed with miry clay, they are mixing themselves with the seed of men, and they're not adhering to one another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. Pretty much the same thing as the King James. Maybe they had it right. How about the 1995 New American Standard Version that so many of you probably use? And in that, you saw the iron mixed with common clay. They will combine with one another in the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, even as iron does not combine with pottery. Again, these literal type of translations are all saying the same thing. So if you favor a less literal version than the three that we read, maybe you haven't seen this, but that is what the passage is actually saying. It's not watered down for our modern day to make it less supernatural. So let's answer those two questions. Who are the they? And what is the seed of men? The they is pretty simple to answer. It's the iron and clay. Because thou hast seen iron mixed with miry clay, they are mixing themselves with the seed of men. Not only are the iron and clay the they aren't human. Because they mix themselves with the seed of men means they don't have the seed of men. Seed in the Bible is what is passed on to future generations. In other words, it's the genetic material, the DNA of you and me, of people. So if the iron and clay are mingling themselves with the DNA of men, they aren't men. That probably makes them fallen angels that are in charge of each of these metal empires. Later in the book of Daniel, in my mind, we see this confirmed. In Daniel 10:20, we see a messenger angel who came to give a prophecy to Daniel, and he said this, I shall now return to fight against the prince of Persia. So I am going forth, and behold, the prince of Greece is about to come. So this good angel's fighting against these two fallen angels in an angelic battle. The fallen angels being the ones in charge of these same kingdoms we just talked about. The silver prince of Persia, the bronze prince of Greece. In the non-canonical book of 3rd Enoch, the iron prince of Rome is listed. In Isaiah 14, we read about the king of Babylon. His name is Hillel, and he is said to have fallen from heaven. And in this previous video, we saw the Bible in both Isaiah and Micah names the clay prince of Assyria. They names him Asher. So there are all 5 of the metal princes seen in this prophecy right there. In the Bible mostly, and also in Enoch. I think that's a pretty solid case that these are angels who control the kingdoms. And as we indicated, they appear to mix themselves with the seed of men. Well, what does that sound like to you? I'm pretty sure you're thinking it sounds like Genesis 6:1-4, where the sons of God came down and married human women and had offspring that were hybrids, part angel, part human, mixing themselves, angels, with the DNA of men. And in this verse, Daniel 10:43, this verse was almost assuredly a verse the apostles were familiar with. One they also likely linked to Genesis 6 in their minds. So when Jesus came and said in Luke 17:26, and just as it happened in the days of Noah, so it will be also in the days of the Son of Man. Based on Nebuchadnezzar's statue, well, they were expecting that human angel hybrids would once again inhabit the earth in the end times. So when Jesus said this about the days of Noah, hybrids are exactly what the apostles would have likely been thinking. It's what any first century Jewish man or woman would likely think. In the same way, when Jesus mentioned the days of Lot, just a few verses later and linked it to his return, the disciples were also probably thinking about supernatural angels on the earth. Now, the Sodom account was different. But the people of that town, they attempted to gang rape the angels. So think about why they did that. Yeah, certainly evil and lust and all this other stuff. But was this also possibly a futile attempt on their part at getting some mixing of DNA? Did the men of Sodom know that the angels were known for mixing DNA? And were they hoping maybe for some improved genetics based on this horrible act? Well, maybe. It's really hard to say, but it's possible. So this type of supernatural thinking, though, does not sit well in our modern world that wants to deny anything supernatural. But according to the Bible, we live in a world that interacts with the supernatural, that the natural world interacts with the spiritual world of God and angels and demons, which Jesus cast out on a routine basis, by the way. How could you possibly deny that the world isn't supernatural? And despite the modern aversion to the supernatural, one thing is certain in my opinion. According to Daniel 2:43, the iron and clay, fallen angels, attempt to mingle themselves or their DNA with the seed and or DNA of men. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that they attempt to do this by sexual means and childbirth. As was done back in the days of Noah, it could easily be done by scientific genetic manipulation. But hybrids are the result either way, which brings us to the 10 kings. Why did I say that at the beginning? Well, let's take a look. And in that you saw the iron mixed with common clay. They will combine with one another in the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, even as iron does not combine with pottery. In the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. That's Daniel 2:43 and 44. So wait a minute, you're asking, where did the term those kings come from? He wasn't talking about kings at all. What is Daniel thinking about when he mentions those kings? The passage is about 10 toes. And you know what? This passage is too. Those kings are the 10 toes. 10 kings, 10 toes. Let me say that again because it's important. The 10 toes on the statue are 10 kings. We know from Revelation 17:12 that the 10 horns on the beast are also these 10 kings. So the 10 toes are the 10 horns, and both are the 10 kings. They're two different symbols, both for these 10 kings. And this verse confirms the 10 kings are iron mixed with clay, the result of fallen angels mingling their angel DNA with human DNA. It means the 10 kings are hybrids, not human. They are the equivalent of Nephilim. So what does that mean for the future? If we're correct about this, it's a very big thing, that non-humans will be among the world's leaders. Has this ever happened before? Yes, strangely it has. And we read about it in the Bible. Who were the first Nephilim kings on earth? Well, we don't know. But it's likely that in the pre-flood period, there were empires and kings. And yes, it's also likely that many of the kings during this period would have been the Nephilim. They were bigger, they were stronger than humans. So they are easy to imagine as being the leaders during the 1,000 years. Remember, it was 1,000 years from the descent of the fallen angels to the flood. The names of several of these might be found on the Sumerian king list, which includes the names of many Sumerian kings, including one you've probably heard about, Gilgamesh, who is a famous king, whom the Sumerians did believe was a hybrid. But what about the Bible? Are there Nephilim kings in the Bible? We already said it. There are. Numbers, we learn about 2 of them that reigned in the Bashan area, Og and Shihon, both of whom were killed by Moses and the Israelites. Then there's the most famous Nephilim king of all, Nimrod. How can we say that he was a Nephilim? Well, non-biblically, stone carvings of Nimrod show him as a giant. And in our previous video with Dr. Doug Hamp on this subject, we discussed Genesis 10, where it says Nimrod became a Gabor in Hebrew, or a mighty one in English. Now, Gabor is a Hebrew word that sometimes can be used for humans, but most of the time is used for a giant. So Nimrod became a hybrid, or became a giant. He wasn't born that way, but became one. How did he just become a hybrid? Obviously, it had to be through scientific genetic manipulation. This is key because that might be what's going to happen to these 10 kings. They might start out as normal humans, normal mortals, and be upgraded by the fallen angels. So let's come back to our question. What is the impact for the future that the world will be ruled at one point by these 10 non-human, possibly Nephilim kings? Well, for one, it explains why the beast and the 10 kings are able to so easily defeat the worldwide governance system of Mystery Babylon. We learn about that in Revelation 17:16. They are the chosen leaders of the fallen angels, and thus they're likely helped by these interdimensional beings to know how to defeat the human government. Second, in the book of Daniel, we learn that the Antichrist is described as a horn, a little horn, just like the 10 horns, and that he, quote, comes up among them. So does this mean the little horn is also a hybrid being with enhanced DNA? The other horns are, then likely he is as well. What kind of rule will these 10 horns have? In a word, short. The Bible tells us in Revelation that their sole purpose is to give their authority to the beast. Another purpose, though, if you think about it, is to be a sign to us. A sign that the beast is coming. We see the 10 kings first and then the beast because he comes up among them. So their function is probably being then regional governors of the beast's empire, who is the dictator and really in charge of that coming beast system. We also have speculated that the beast will tie these type of genetic upgrades for all people later in the taking of the mark of the beast. If this is so, the beast will probably use the 10 kings as models of what a new enhanced person will be like. Sort of like a sample of what you can become. So look for that as well if you live to see it. The question that I'd probably be asking right now, if I was hearing this, is how could all this happen in the next 7 to 10 years? The answer, I think, is fallen angels. If humans were planning and carrying out genetic upgrades like this, it wouldn't happen that quickly, maybe ever. But if advanced beings are doing it with advanced knowledge of science and computing, well, that's a completely different story. So another question we have is, should we be looking for hybrids among the earth's rulers today? Yeah, that's an interesting question, isn't it? Have the fallen angels already been at work? And are some earthly rulers hybrids? If this really is the end times, then we should expect the Bible says what will happen. Fallen angels will be cast down. One of the original Metal Kingdom angels will return to the earth from the bottomless pit. And hybrid 10 kings will give their authority to the Antichrist. That's what we're told happens. So it is possible the 10 kings are hybrids now, or it's possible they will become hybrids later through the process of genetic manipulation. In my opinion, it's impossible to say with certainty which it is based on the biblical texts. Now, a final question, how much of this genetic manipulation may have to do with the alien phenomenon? And the reports of alien abductions on this channel, we believe aliens are actually demonic fallen angels. Is this being supported by the governments of the world and even the Vatican? Click right here to keep watching and discover the unusual connection Pope Francis and the Vatican have with the UFO phenomenon. Is the Pope preparing the way for these fallen angels? Till then, this is Nelson, and I'll see you there.